Hello there! Welcome back to Charles Circle, and welcome back to Captain of Industry. Last time, we updated our refinery to include naphtha processing. We also upgraded our power plants and built a waste management facility. The increased efficiency of our refinery reduced how much byproduct we were burning off, which in turn reduced our pollution and had a huge positive impact on our citizens' health. That improved even further as our waste management facility sent water and landfill pollution all the way to zero. So today, we're going to continue that trend by installing exhaust scrubbers. So we'll kick today off by installing exhaust scrubbers in a few locations around the base, and we'll probably get to implement a few other fun mid-game technologies as well. But first, I need to address the allegations. In the comments section of the last episode, I was thoroughly, and correctly, roasted for my pronunciation of a certain word that refers to the chemical process of running current through water, which is properly called not electrolysis, but electrolysis. In my defense, it's clearly a compound word from the two parts electro and lysis, describing the current, electro, self-explanatory, and the impact of running that current, lysis, to break down. After all, that's what happens in the electrolyzer, which is how you pronounce it, by the way. The machine that performs electrolysis is not called an electrolyzer, nor is Gatorade filled with electrolytes, so riddle me that. But that's what we're doing here. We're running a current through a more complicated molecule and breaking it down into its constituent parts. Although looking at the numbers here, these ratios don't actually balance, right? We're getting shortchanged on hydrogen, I think. It's also worth pointing out that this is why the copper electrolysis building, despite only being two of them in our base, is our second or third, depending, biggest consumer of electricity. Nevertheless, precision is important, and we fell short of the mark here, so please accept my deepest apologies, and my promise that I will try to do better. If I were a gambling man, though, I'd set the over-under on my next slip-up by the end of the episode. Place your bets. Back to our regularly scheduled programming, though, let's talk about exhaust scrubbers. So, what does an exhaust scrubber do? Kind of what it says on the tin. So we're going to take exhaust from, collectively, quite a few different sources around our base. We are going to add a bit of water and some limestone, and what we get out is, hey, some sulfur, a good chunk of carbon dioxide, some steam low, and a bit of slag. There's also this alternate recipe. If you are unwilling to spend the limestone in a less throughput way, you can still process it and get back most of the same things. You don't generate the slag, and you do generate a little bit more air pollution. Generally, I am very willing to spend the limestone. That's probably the last time you're going to see that recipe in this playthrough. So, what is the impact of this? Well, in addition to generating some sulfur, which, as we left it at the end of last episode, is going to be a nice thing for us, we don't quite make enough coming out of the refinery to handle all of our needs on the fertilizer and acid front for both copper and the glass factory, but it's also going to generate carbon dioxide. Or perhaps a better way of saying this is, it's going to turn exhaust into a smaller volume of carbon dioxide. So, over here in the smokestack, you'll see that by unit of volume, carbon dioxide is half as much pollution to release into the air as exhaust is. Currently, we're just dumping all of our exhaust up into the sky and creating all of this air pollution. So for the same volume of CO2, we would be generating half as much air pollution. That's a nice reduction in and of itself. But if you come back here, you'll see it's not 1-to-1. And in fact, it reduces to 40% of the original volume. When you then consider that it's a 50% reduction in pollution from there, we're actually only going to be spitting out 20% of the pollution that we would be spitting out if we were simply letting exhaust vent. So it's an 80% reduction. The other thing we get out is some steam low. Now there are three things that we can do with steam low, and I think we're familiar with all of them, but just to quickly review, the low pressure turbine, which we unlocked last episode, allows us to take that steam low, turn it into a little bit more mechanical power, which we can of course turn into electrical power, and a bit of depleted steam, which can then go into a cooling tower and be turned back into water 50% by volume with our current technology. The other one that we also unlocked last episode is the thermal desalinator. It can be used to mix with a bit of seawater to bring back clear water and some brine. The final option is to simply skip the first step and put it directly into a cooling tower and get back, again, 50% by volume water with our current technology. Any of these is valid, in my humble opinion, but I tend not to use it for power generation because this tends to be a very spiky supply. What I mean by that is, well, it's going to come from all these different factories, all of which shut down entirely if they are full. So anytime this steel is full, we are generating 0 exhaust. But anytime we're making steel, we're generating something like 300 exhaust. So it's going to go up and down and up and down, and I'd rather not have that be a property of our power supply. The other two are essentially a question here of where you're located for me. If you are near a coast, I generally think that it's worth simply running things through a thermal desalinator, as long as the water that you're producing doesn't need to be consumed in a continuous manner, because you run up against that same spiky supply dynamic I was just talking about, or if it's going to be consumed in a way that is very tightly correlated with the spikiness of that supply, i.e., if you're using it to recycle back into this water loop, right? When we're producing a lot of this, we'll be consuming a lot of this. That's the neat tidiness of a recycling loop. We're going to build one here, spoiler alert, I'll talk about it in a moment. As a result, it's not near a coast, and it's not worth running an enormous pipe like that, in my opinion, so we'll probably just do cooling towers. That'll still save us 50% of the water overall, because it's 1-to-1 here, so this will be a net 24 water that we'll need instead. Sulfur, slag, we know what to do with. We'll dump the slag, we'll take the sulfur, and we'll send it, well, anywhere that needs it. But again, we're talking about fertilizer or acid out here for the copper electrolysis step, or acid for the sand mix, or glass mix rather, out here. There we are in the glass factory. So we'll send that by truck wherever we need to, no problem. I think what we'll end up doing is take all of the exhaust from this central manufacturing area. So as I mentioned, the steel factory is going to be our biggest single producer, and eventually, in most of my steel factory builds, I just build an integrated exhaust scrubber because there's just enough going on here. The blast furnace step has usually 24, occasionally less, but usually 24. The oxygen furnace step has another 24, and so each of these duos is roughly 100 between these 4 machines, so 100, 200, 300. It's quite a bit. We also get another 50 from these two, roughly, and about 50 from these two, and on average, depending on how often this is firing and whether we've got any biomass or animal feed to use, I would call this roughly another 50. So between 50, 50, 50, and 300, that's 450-ish, which is pretty much our capacity here. So what I'll do is run exhaust pipes here, 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 and here into this central area. I will say, in this playthrough, it's not going to be something that we try to do to scrub every last little bit of exhaust. For example, I don't think I'm going to bother running the occasional 9 exhaust from these rotary kilns. It's, of course, every little bit is directionally helpful, but I don't think it's necessarily worth chasing in its entirety. We're going to place at least our first couple in some good bang for your buck areas. As I mentioned, this will be one, and honestly, the only other one that's a significant concentration is out here in the refinery area. Not our refinery buildings, but the boilers that run them. So this boiler creates quite a bit of exhaust when it's burning either naphtha or heavy oil to give us the steam to run the entire refinery itself. We also get a decent amount at the oil power plant, and we'll have to separate out the CO2 and fuel gas, probably sequester it to just this boiler and remove it from this one. Otherwise, we'll have to sort out the CO2 from the actual exhaust, and there is not a convenient sorter in the fluids and pipes section the way that there is for conveyor belts. But that's all very doable. I think what I'll do now is simply hop in and get this first one all wired up. See you in a moment. All right, let's see what I missed, but I think we've got everything connected up. Let's find out. So the exhaust scrubber, of course, is here, and the water is run through this recycling loop. We prioritize the steam low output up to 48 in these two cooling towers. That will all come back around here and is prioritized in, but we backfill off of this main water main. And we should have, it seems, enough throughput here. Let's keep an eye on it though. Then, of course, we have to bring in the limestone. That's this one. We have to take out the slag and sulfur. That's these two. And we have to vent the CO2. In fact, we should remove the exhaust recipe. This should only ever be venting CO2. In the past, and maybe I would even suggest this, it can be helpful, I have in the past, and it can be helpful to have a sort of an overflow here, because one of the issues that you can have is that your exhaust can get backed up here. Let's say you're full on sulfur or out of limestone or whatever, and then that backs up all of your factories. Sometimes it's nice to have a balancer and an overflow that simply says, well, I'd rather be polluting than not running everything. We're gonna try to get away without it. Let's see. But I'd like to have alerts if this is ever empty. And in fact, let's set this at a higher priority as well. Same thing here, let me know if it's full. Let's say priority 3 here too. And same with the sulfur. So this ought to be good. And then let's trace the actual outputs here. So the output of the steel factory is actually going to exceed 200. So what we need to do is use our recently unlocked pipe 3, which can do up to 450. Pretty good, right? So we don't need that until these two lines merge up, but once we do, this will come all the way out here and gets its own dedicated input. The other 3 inputs all meet up here, but start, for example, at the glass factory, comes out here following the water main. And out in this direction, we have the exhaust from the coal power plant, which we really need to get going. And in fact, I'm gonna just do that right now. We are gonna run out of power without that. So the last bit is from the copper factory, and that comes out through here and joins up. Did we cover everything? I think we did. Let's see. So I'm going to actually, just because everything now needs a real a real quick build, or we're going to back up these factories, I'm going to try to Unity boost the construction of all of these. If I turned off the structures piece, that would help. So there we go. This is affordable, and this is one of those situations where 30 Unity just short is quite a bit when we could just construct this, but I think I'm willing to do it in this situation to keep it from being a real mess. So let's see how it goes. Need to get the limestone in real quick. That's going to be our limiting factor. I cannot Unity push that, but hopefully the pipes themselves serve as storage, you know? And we have not yet flipped, yeah, and there's our power, right? So this is, would you look at that? It's all backed up. Oh, but it's not connected. So there you go. Wouldn't be one of our videos unless I missed one square. So here we are. Let's go ahead and get that sorted. This should be sufficient as a pipe 1, but we might want it to be a pipe 2 just so that we can clear through any backlog on this. Let's see. I think we can get away with it just being a pipe 1 for now. And then this should all be fine as well. Only 2 blast furnaces here. So let's give it a moment, and we'll come back when it is in motion. All right, a little while later, it does seem to be working as designed. So we are scrubbing up the exhaust. We're not quite generating the full 480, but this is sort of the ceiling of what we would generate if everything were running, so that's fine. I, of course, did have to go back over here and flip the direction of all of these exhaust pipes. They were previously right, pointing to this smokestack, which is now a bit overkill to dispose of a little bit of nitrogen here and there, but it's already in place, so good enough. But between that and all these other areas that we are pulling exhaust from, this is running, I think, it will start to run much closer to 100%. In the green here, you can see it's starting to ramp up the proportion of the time that it is running. So the refinery is the other area we said probably justifies an exhaust scrubber. But before we place it, we got a couple of questions asking why we weren't auto-balancing this turbine last episode. So let's zoom out for a moment and talk about the overall approach for our power strategy. So our top priority for generating power is the oil power plant, because it's a way to productively dispose of oil byproducts. However, because we can't guarantee a constant stream of oil byproducts when we cap on diesel storage, we have our entire coal power plant on auto balance. That's because it's a backup. We don't want the coal power plant burning fuel when it doesn't need to, so it only fires when our power demand isn't met by the oil power plant, i.e. because it's out of fuel. It's worth acknowledging, however, that since our oil power plant's max capacity got upgraded all the way to 18 megawatts the last episode, and that our current power demand is less than 18 megawatts, significantly so in fact, we should at least consider auto-balancing within the oil power plant as well. After all, if we're firing at 18 megawatts constantly, that would be a huge waste, generating twice as much power as we need, and therefore burning twice as much fuel for zero benefit. The thing is though, we're only firing intermittently right now. When we do have supply, we generate that max capacity's worth of power in the moment, but excess above our current power demand is first sent to the flywheel battery. It's stored here, and it can discharge later to still provide power when we're out of byproducts. Only once the flywheel is completely full is any power actually wasted. So as long as the flywheel never maxes out, we don't really need to have anything on auto balance here. And I've been keeping an eye on it. If it is happening right now, I haven't seen it. So at worst, it's a rare waste, although it is absolutely a possibility. And that likelihood probably increases in the future. Where we definitely are being a little inefficient though, is every time a turbine spins up from 0, it takes a moment to run at a full 100% efficiency. It's not usually a huge deal, but because of our intermittent supply, it's happening a decent amount here. When fuel starts to trickle back in, all 3 turbines, as we can see, start to spin up, only to spin back down again soon after. Bam. Now, auto balance doesn't fix this problem because it would still fire as long as there's room in the flywheel battery to accept the excess mechanical power that it's trying to generate in those moments. So if anything, we should really just pause one, if not two pairs of the high and low pressure turbines on this setup. We don't need all three of these at this point to get through our current byproduct supply right now. So it'd be best to just run fewer of them at closer to 100% continuously, minimizing the collective time spent in that inefficient spinning up phase. I think pausing two of these three would mean backing up on our byproducts relatively quickly, but if that's true, we can unpause the next set, and at least we definitely wouldn't have been spinning up and down as much then. We'd have been running that one set at 100%. So let's run the experiment and find out. If all of that was too complicated or boring to bother with, I would understand. The simplest thing you can do is just put everything everywhere on auto balance and make sure that you have a flywheel. That would get you most of the way there. Big picture, these are relatively marginal efficiency gains, but they can add up over time. And if you are interested in going a layer deeper, I would aim to minimize the collective time your turbines are spending in that inefficient spin-up phase, while ensuring that you're not generating power that you can't consume, or at least store in a flywheel. Alright, last thing before we set up the next exhaust scrubber. Where should we go next in the tech tree? Our next big milestone is Electronics 2. It's a huge step. It's a complicated build with a bunch of intermediate products, and they go into everything in the next phase of the game. They're the next thing we mix in for the next level of construction parts, the next level of maintenance, the next level of lab equipment, everything. And there's a ton of great stuff on the next sector of the tech tree that we would unlock once we have them up and running. So there's an argument for it. There's a couple technologies, as I said, we'd have to implement, but it's pretty close and it's very doable. We can definitely afford it. We have plenty of production capacity across essentially all sectors. Our food's in a great spot. We have basic materials coming out of our ears. Our manufactured goods are all jammed up as well. Our refinery's doing just fine. And our power production is more than sufficient, right? None of our raw material sources are particularly depleted either. Like our mines are looking good for now. We haven't even touched our forestry really. Our oil rig out on the world map is just fine. And we've got tons of unity, despite the fact that we're splurging on a whole bunch of edicts that we don't necessarily need, more nice to have than need to have. So if we wanted to, we could absolutely beeline an Electronics 2 setup. Or we could take our time, build up to it a little bit more carefully, and carry some momentum with us. And if you couldn't tell by that framing, that's the direction that I'm leaning. I want the playthrough to be accessible, which means we should probably maintain a reasonable pace, and I also want to take our time exploring the new Update 4 stuff. So hear me out. Long term, I'm envisioning a sprawling landscape here where we have different factories on different islands, each specializing in something else, and sending a lot of stuff around via long-distance rail with our fancy new trains across our fancy new bridges. And as the first step, I'm actually envisioning a pretty sizable Electronics 2 factory on this island that we already have a bridge over to. We would need, in order to make it, a whole bunch of copper, hey look at that, a whole bunch of sand, oh hey look at that, and a decent amount of coal, would you look at that. You know what else wouldn't hurt? Some limestone and some water. We'd still have to bring some stuff in manually, but that's one hell of a start. If we want to spin up that factory though, we kind of have to prepare the physical space, and it is far too pristine right now. So if we wanted to spin it up, we could bring in some infrastructure from the other island and test out a lot of the various involved technologies along the way, don't you think? So with all that in mind then, what do we need to set in motion right now? As I said, we've got some terraforming we need to do over there, so we should try to get a new crew or two spun up at our vehicle depot, right? We should probably extend our rail network over there if we're going to be sending high volumes of stuff back and forth, so let's keep an eye out for a reasonable excuse to do that. And what are those technologies that we should get under our belt first? Well, plastic's a big one. We can use that for medical supplies in the meanwhile. It'd be a good excuse to set that up, explore that, and make sure that we have a good feel for that. Silicon, the other big ingredient here, requires a pretty decent amount of hydrogen, actually, in its supply chain. And, well, we could come on up here and set up a proper hydrogen part of our refinery and use that to explore some cracking options and some hydrogen vehicles and trains and such. We would definitely benefit in this factory from having Blast Furnace II technology up and running. This is both higher throughput and more efficient, so we want this before we start a new factory for sure. Good news, we have that unlocked and we can start installing that in our existing factories already to our benefit. We'll probably also want to grab a whole bunch of infrastructure upgrades like the better recycling trio up here and the whole collection of ship stuff and everything on the world map that would unlock for us. Not to mention larger storages would be great if we're dealing with larger volumes. We could certainly go into the better housing setup. That would be excellent. We're starting to run out of room in our housing area, as you can probably appreciate over here. Gonna need to add at least one more soon, actually, in order to expand really anything. Do that while I'm thinking about it, actually. Where should we start, though, right? Well, we've been on a bit of a health kick for our citizens lately, so maybe we'll go plastic into medical supplies. It feels like as good a rationale as any to start somewhere. So let's do that. So what we're going to do tactically is start by finishing off the exhaust scrubber setup, and then we'll start to move some Blast Furnace IIs into our basic material productions. All right, let's throw in the exhaust scrubber here. Should be relatively straightforward. We'll bring in the limestone. We have water in this area already. We will dump the slag manually, and we will probably run the sulfur through the same refinery output. So I'll hop into it here. We can go ahead and delete this ore sorting plant too. All right, I think this is it. We are going to wait. We're not going to unpause yet because I have to delete some things and then immediately do the surgery of reconnecting so nothing breaks. But let's walk through the overall structure. So of course, our main building here in the middle has our same recipe. It takes all of our exhaust, our water, our limestone. We spit out sulfur, CO2, steamlow, and slag. Slag is easy. We dispose of it out here. I've been, just as we have here, creating sort of a road front, but out this way, we're definitely going to have to make this wider and more accessible, but that's sort of the second edge, I think, that we're going to leave for our trucks to interact with the exterior of the refinery structure. So slag is out here. Sulfur, though, we actually just run straight through all the way to the exact same line with the exact same priorities as our refinery. This should still give us plenty of room to continue to expanding sour water strippers in this same axis if we want to, as we need to. So I think we managed to shoot that gap, but we can always adjust the belt if we need to in the future, no problem. CO2 goes directly into this smokestack, who needs none of these other superfluous recipes. He will simply vent our CO2 as it's generated. The steam low comes directly out into cooling towers. These definitely do not need to be pipe 2s, but at this point I'm just kind of building pipe 2s because, well, it's like what we have. We can definitely afford it. So the water, which we need to connect up here, will prioritize the recycling, of course, and then spit in here. But the other source, the backfill source, simply comes branching off of this desalination setup. The other thing we could do, I'm not doing it now for the sake of simplicity, but just to call it out, if you want to get fancy, you could actually be using that steam low that we're generating over here to run this exact same desalinator. You could add this recipe, put it up top on priority, and then run a balancer here, and that would allow us to avoid spending some steam generation over here. As I said, I'm not quite willing to do the extra effort there, but it is technically, I think, probably a more efficient way to do this. You got to run the pipe, that's kind of the whole thing, but it's, I would say, worth the effort if you feel like doing it. I don't right now, so be it. But then we, of course, gather up all of our exhaust. And so this comes, it joins up here, but it comes from two places. The first is this gas boiler that generates the steam to run the refinery buildings itself. All of our distillers and our sour water stripper, that's what this boiler does. It also runs the thermal desalinator. It's not even running at 50% speed right now, which is great. It means we can expand our refinery without having to add another one of these. But we do want to save space for another one, which is why I ran the pipe a little bit awkwardly out and around this way, because I do still want us to be able to expand our throughput out this direction without any much trouble. So that's this pipe, comes out this way and meets up here. The other one that it joins up with is going to be this one. So what we've done here is we've removed the fuel gas recipe because it spits out CO2, not exhaust. CO2 we'd like to just vent directly. So I've actually taken this boiler, which had been our original one, but is actually, I think, going to fire less often now, and it will only fire on fuel gas. We'll adjust this as necessary, but I think it should work. Basically what it means then is that the exhaust coming only from this boiler will go up this way and go along this pipe, and this pipe is now superfluous. This CO2 will simply go directly into this smokestack, and that's it. So, as we did before, I think it's probably worth spending some Unity. Thank goodness we have the parts. Let's go ahead and instant build all of this, and then I will need to jump in and delete this quickly as well. There it goes. Let's get the very last segment of pipe sorted out here. And then, of course, the most important thing we're going to do in this entire build is repave that little square that became exposed after our smokestack is removed. Oh, shoot. And the other thing we're going to need to do is adjust our balancer. Since our fuel gas is only going to one of these boilers now, it needs to directly connect here to only this. So let's go ahead and clear this out and adjust this pipe. All right, I think that should do it. Sort of clear out the last little bits of leftover recipe, and I think we'll be okay here. There is a question, although I think it's really not a big deal at all, whether we would want to add a steam prioritization balancer, say if we wanted to encourage the use of fuel gas over the other byproducts or vice versa. We could decide which of these we want to make sure has first priority in spending. I think we're okay for now, but it's something to keep in mind as we are still kind of pretty much running everything down, right? Even though we've paused 2/3 of this. So we'll come back to it, but that's the sort of flexibility that I like about having an oil power plant in general. little while later, I think everything's working over here. We've got our limestone in, sulfur coming out, as is the slag. And this one is not going to run anywhere close to 100%, right? Even if these boilers were, call it 90 plus 90, even if these were both running at 100%, and they really are not even collectively are they hitting 100%, we would be at, a quarter here. But it's still a decent amount of exhaust, and so I think this is infrastructure worth having, and that number is only going to go up over time as we increase. Hey, one other fun thing that I feel like I should mention, they added this in shortly after update 4. One of the things that can get really messy in a refinery is all these pillars. Just visually, it's very difficult. They introduced a command, which you can, using the squiggly tilde mark left of your number 1 on your keyboard, you can open the console, and there's a command called remove redundant transport pillars that will remove any redundant transport pillars. And what that means is, now, as of very recently, you are able to adjust your pillars in the same way that you used to only be able to do with train track elevated support pillars. And just to show it off, right, you can add a pillar in here manually. If it were viable to delete this pillar, you could remove it, but since we've deleted all of the unnecessary ones, we shouldn't actually be able to delete anything right this second. But I find that, it's really helpful in general. Technically, I think it even directionally improves performance by reducing the object limit or something. But really, most importantly, I think it's so much easier to see at a refinery when you don't have all of this metal scaffolding everywhere. So, fun little tool, nice little quality of life thing. Glad they added that. And so, by the way, with all of the new limestone demand that we've just introduced, I think we should probably go ahead and add a new excavator. So I've spun up some of that. I'm actually going to maybe turn these into all of them larger diesel trucks. And then I think we also have finally the 2 excavators I was thinking about spinning up for a terraforming crew on the other side of the island. So let's come over here and maybe think about what we want to do in this area. So big picture, first thing we should do is make sure that any train tracks over here actually have room to operate. So I think we'll probably try to clean this up in the very short term. But longer term, we want all of this ridge gone, don't we? Because this is going to be a large open area for a factory floor. We'll probably need to get a way through here to mine this copper too, and I think we'll just have like a massive ore sorting complex here. Something like that. We'll have to mine the coal separately, I'm sure. At any rate, we start here, and I think we try to cut through the ridge and then eventually just push the whole ridge out into the ocean, I'm sure. So I'm gonna set up a mine control tower, ore sorting plant, etc. right in this area for now. All right, so I think this is good. We will, as before, sort rock and dirt here. We will say that you can dump the rock in this area, which is what this is all about. We're gonna need to be able to put it somewhere. The dirt, I haven't decided. I guess we don't really need dirt here so much. We would be using it for either aesthetics, which, yeah, we're gonna level this, but do we really wanna dig it up and then cover it in dirt just to turn around and pave the whole thing over as a factory? Seems unnecessary. So I'm trying to decide, do we care enough to bring the dirt specifically elsewhere, or should we just throw it in here as well with the rock? I think that's the answer. I just don't think it's worth sending it via truck all the way to the other island over the bridge and back. I don't know. Maybe I'll think it's wasteful in the future. I think it's probably pretty low stakes right now, so we'll call that good enough. The other thought I had is that's pretty far now. We've added a whole bunch of excavators. I do wonder if we should be upgrading or adding more trucks, let's say, to our fuel station so that we are able to refuel everybody from a much more efficient perspective. We don't want our excavators either coming over here, which they won't now because there's a fuel station, or sitting there waiting for an excavator to receive fuel. We usually get an alert for that, but maybe we'll get out ahead of it. Alright, we're not going to let them dump dirt here anymore because, I don't know, it just looks kind of bad. I think we'll live with the inefficiency of hauling it across the map, but I just don't like the pockmark and weird shape and color. So that's the important stuff. Alright, well let's talk about Blast Furnace IIs. And the first place we're going to do this, I think, is actually over at the glass factory because it's the simplest. So a Blast Furnace II is a larger building than a Blast Furnace I, but it does pretty much the same things. So remind ourselves the shape of the glass factory Blast Furnace I set of recipes. Priority to broken glass plus coal equals molten glass and exhaust. Second backfill recipe is glass mix plus more coal equals same glass plus slag and more exhaust. Same shape is true over here, right? We're going to say preference to the recycled recipe because it's less coal, no slag, and less exhaust. But if you go through and look at this, like these numbers are doubled, these numbers are doubled, these numbers are not. So for twice the throughput, we actually also get better efficiency. It should be 12 and 24 when we go over here to double up, but it's not. It's 9 and 15. It's doubled up on slag. It's not doubled up on exhaust. So this is actually a more fuel efficient and less polluting for the same volume machine, which is great. What's the trade-off? Well, it's more expensive to build, obviously. That's a lot of parts 3, isn't it? The other thing is, well, it's 8 workers. Well, if we double the throughput, are we going to cost 16? Actually, it's 18, so it's actually slightly more. And, fun fact, the Blast Furnace is from so early in the game, it has no maintenance cost. The Blast Furnace II has a maintenance cost, a very manageable one. We're going to install these everywhere eventually, but something to keep in mind. So, if we were to upgrade both of these in place, we would suddenly have the throughput for twice as many glass makers. We're kind of good on glass. We don't really need to upgrade that right now, and we'd also have to upgrade our mixer as well for matching maximum throughput. It makes 60, which is enough right now for 30 plus 30, but this would be enough for one machine. So what we're going to do here, actually, is to upgrade one of them, pause the other, and connect their molten channels. Nice and simple. It's not the long-term solution. Eventually we'll have an upgraded glassmaker as well that will handle the throughput of these machines a little better. So, you know, this is for now. I'm not going to delete this. We will eventually also upgrade it, but this is the solution for now, pretty much. So I'll let our machines get to it, but that's it. Glass is very easy on the Blast Furnace II front. It's the only one that is, though, because the increased throughput and efficiency is also true when you come over to upgrade at the iron plant, but there's some complexity that comes along with it. So Blast Furnace II with the same set of recipes. Oh, well, what happened to our iron ore one? Well, if you come in, you actually see that there's a brand new, different recipe. This is crushed iron ore, and we have to add limestone. Now, comparing these two, it's actually still more efficient, right? It's not 24 coal. We still have the same increase in coal efficiency and the same decrease in pollution compared to what 2 of these Blast Furnace 1s would do. But more than that, crushed iron ore, which by the way is just iron ore 1-to-1 run through a crusher. Now we have the large version of this. We've been using the smaller one over at the concrete factory to make gravel and such. But it's actually more efficient because twice this would be 60 iron ore. This is 48. That's going to add up over time. So this is more efficient from an iron ore perspective. The exact same thing is true over at the copper factory. Instead of adding limestone as a third ingredient, we add sand. So these are really good upgrades that we want to get installed here, not just for more throughput, and in fact we're going to be throughput limited here, but also for efficiency. So I think the next place we'll do it, actually counterintuitively, is probably over at the copper plant. So the other thing that we'll have here is the metal caster 2. Metal caster 2 is twice the throughput as well, so we'll be able to do that. There is no copper electrolysis 2. There, nailed it. But we would simply add another one. And wouldn't you know it, we kind of left space for that. I wonder if that was an accident. So I think we'll do this over here. Here's a question. How much are these running? Yeah, not that much. So maybe what we'll do is upgrade and pause. So let's upgrade this whole line and then just pause the other. I think that'll work for now. Little awkward on the belt spacing here. Probably could have made that more elegant, but it is functional, and I think that's most of what I care about here. So this now means that this single line, once we're done upgrading here, will have the same throughput as the previous 2 lines did combined. Of course, we need to set up the crusher, though, because this new Blast Furnace 2 will not accept just normal copper. And it'll need sand, so let's hop in and take care of that as well. All right, so we'll let the remainder of this proper ore trickle through to this side as we continue to upgrade, but the other thing we need to do here is add a new input for the sand. So we're simply going to add a 3rd level lift. And there we go. So we are up to a belt 2 over here because this is going to take 48, as will eventually this. But for now, I think we can probably just pause this whole second line. Eventually, we do want to go ahead and get it upgraded, but for now, there's really no reason to hold more capacity than we actually properly require here. So let's see how this works. Of course, if it turns out that if we need more of electronics, then we can definitely increase the throughput here. If anything though, the fact that we're only still on assembly 2s over here is our limiter, but even these aren't running at full capacity. So all good for now, I think. So now that we have the concept in mind, let's go over and do it in the steel factory as well. I will say, we're going to be belt limited here way faster, right? Because 48 is going to handle, we can get to 200 when we get to 4 of these. So we'll probably end up pausing and then upgrading, something like that. But let's do it, let's say 2 of these at a time. Also worth mentioning, there's an upgraded oxygen furnace so that we can match still the double throughput here with the double throughput here. There's an upgraded cooled caster, same thing here. There is not an upgraded air separator. So we need to do the same thing with the crusher here. I'll probably clear out a lot of this stuff and sort of refactor this whole space for a bit, but it should still be about as straightforward. So I'll hop in and take care of that. Alright, well, just because I'm worried about us running low on steel as we upgrade the steel factory, I have decided to allow trucks to come drop off any spare iron ore, since we've run this as a crushed iron ore line now. But our first row is working, so that's good news. And I think it'll be time to take a swing at the second. So I'll jump in and do that in a moment here. Of course, going through, right, a ton of parts 3 is exactly what takes steel. So this is the slow and arduous process, but we'll get moving on it for sure. All right, so with 2 of these up and running, it actually technically means we can pause these. I don't know that we're gonna do it just yet. We just are hurting on steel, so I'm gonna not pause these as long as I can get away with it. We're still bringing in manually any leftover iron ore, so we wanna get there eventually, but just to keep the upgrade process smooth, let's keep going. Okay, I think that should do it. So this means a couple things. We now have the equivalent of 8 when we had 6 before of these old school throughputs. I think that means it is time to pause these. Certainly we will keep them around because we'll end up upgrading them eventually too, but we are officially throughput bottlenecked on at least this crushed iron ore belt. We could still keep bringing stuff over manually here because it's the old school recipes, but that defeats the entire point. We were trying to improve our efficiency in the longer term. That's the real value of moving to these Blast Furnace IIs. So I think we had already upgraded all of our pipes and such through here. I'll keep an eye out for any bottlenecks in, say, like the exhaust throughput, which has probably increased, but not by all that much, right? We've gone from 6 to 8, so that should be an increase, but again, these are more efficient than twice one of these. So let's, as I said, keep an eye. I'll make sure that everything's actually running properly at 100% here for a bit, but I think the functional component of this is done. Everything looks okay so far. By the way, meant to mention, we can pause one of these air separators as well. The oxygen furnace 2, it's twice the throughput. It doesn't require any more oxygen. Check this out. It's still 18, right? Oxygen furnace basic, 18 to go 24 to 12. Still 18 to go 48 to 24. Pretty good. Pretty good. So that'll save us a little bit here. We'll obviously not destroy that building because it will support these when they get upgraded. But we are, I think we're good to go here. Everything seems to be working just fine. We are at pretty much max efficiency for the trailing quite a few months now, so good to see. In just a moment, we will wrap up the hospital tech because we've already gotten fermentation and plastic along the way, so I suppose that'll be the next thing to set up. All right, looking at the runtime, I think we're actually going to save medical supplies for next episode. We'll need to throw together plastic as well as ethanol, so I'd rather not open that can of worms just yet. A couple quick updates, though. The first, as predicted, going down to one set of turbines has in fact backed us up on byproducts, so let's go ahead and unpause the second and see if we can find some equilibrium there, but we'll at least run these things down, I'm sure, in the short term. Maybe we'll even flip over to heavy oil as a priority. So, as expected, not a problem. Happy to have the power back. Good stuff. On the terraforming front, out here on our other island, we are officially moving our tree harvesting operation over here. We have finally clear-cut all of the accessible trees, non-forestry division out on our home island, so it's time to start doing it out here as well, create some space, but get something for it. I actually created a little wood storage here in order to speed that along so that we don't have to run everything across each time. I'm worried that that means that someone's bringing it over here when they shouldn't, but we'll deal with that later. Also going to set up a diesel storage here so that we are able to refuel trucks and such in this area. This is the beginnings of what will probably end up being quite an outpost in the longer run, which is pretty cool. So very excited to see that start. The other part we did was to move the earth moving crew over to this area to start the initial cut through this ridge. Plenty left to do once we get to the other side, but that will be a milestone, being able to reach into this space. So also pretty good to see there. Back on this side of the bridge, we are onto this last little bit of dirt here, this last pile, and then this area will be nice and flat and ready for something. I don't know exactly what we'll do here. Maybe a grand train station in this area to handle imports coming in from the other islands off in the distance. That'd be kind of cool, huh? Once that's wrapped up, though, we'll have this crew move over here, cut through this little ridge to get to this sneaky little oil patch that we've been neglecting so far in the game. Be nice to make use of that, I'm sure. And then the last terraforming update is that this ramp is coming along really well, and we are chipping into this ridge too. So we'll be able to build that bridge over to the other island in short order too. And then the last thing I wanted to show off, check this out. Look at that. There's your 80% reduction in pollution over the course of the installation of just those 2 exhaust scrubbers. It can have quite an impact even if you don't chase every last little scrap of exhaust. The other part that we hoped for, but we are also able to observe, is plenty of sulfur again, so we are good on fertilizer. So exhaust scrubbers, excellent stuff, excellent tech. Happy we have it installed. Let's leave it there for today though. I don't think we have any blueprints for this episode, actually. We did a lot of upgrading in place rather than net new builds, just the exhaust scrubbers on that front. But maybe we'll do a quick little review just for reference here in case you want one last time. Our primary exhaust scrubber, I would say, the one inside the rail loop here that is servicing our manufacturing zone, has the relatively straightforward setup here that you can see, hopefully with the grid in case that's helpful to you. Our other servicing the refinery out this way, also relatively straightforward. Does not have nearly the utilization yet, but for example, when we install plastic next episode, that will also go right here, which is nice to have. And then we have our installations of blast furnaces, I would say the other big highlight of the day. These have improved our efficiency, if not our throughput, in this situation here at the glass factory, but also over at copper, we've, for the same throughput, become more efficient here as well. And over at the steel factory, this is not only more efficient, it's actually, I guess, 33% more throughput, right? We went from 6 tier 1s to 4 tier 2s, which is equivalent to the production of 8 tier 1s. So another nice installation here. Blast Furnace IIs, they are one of my favorite buildings in the game, one of my favorite updates, or upgrades rather, to go through. Good. Well, yeah, so we'll call it here. Next time, certainly, I think we can get to the medical supplies and all of that. We'll continue to chase some of those technologies that we're going to use as the foundation for approaching the Electronics 2 stage of the game, and with the intention and goal of building a pretty decent sized outpost and eventual factory out on this other island. It'll be nice to really expand our footprint. Should be fun. Start dreaming. Let me know what you think. I'm excited about the direction we're gonna take this. Let me know if you are too. If you are, make sure to stop by again for the next episode. But until then, have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.